If you're a viewer of the channel, you know I'm already highly skeptical of You're the Villain. The way DC's promoting and now executing it in Batman Superman has only firmed my stance. This week's Batman Superman spins out of the pages of Scott Snyder's Batman Who Lolls miniseries. Who Lolls is the breakout villain from Snyder's 2017 mega hit Dark Knight's Metal. Snyder associate Joshua Williamson leads the series with recent Marvel import David Marquez. When Batman Superman was announced in April, it promised the two iconic heroes would hunt down the identity of 6 DC heroes infected with the Batman Who Lolls pathogen and are turning evil. This group of infected heroes are being called the new Secret Six as DC fully launches into their enormous You're the Villain event. Full disclosure, Batman Superman #1 is an underwhelming debut for the flagship You're the Villain series. I'll get into all the reasons I find the comic lacking in a moment, but first I want to point out a few circumstances working against Joshua Williamson and David Marquez before their series released this week. Batman and Superman are both currently knee-deep in multiple story arcs spanning the galaxy. Both heroes are involved in Brian Michael Bendis' exceptionally boring mystery thriller, Event Leviathan. In that story, the mysterious Leviathan and his acolytes have laid waste to the DC Universe covert agencies and are threatening to take over the world. Also, in Tom King's final story arc on Batman, City of Bane, Bruce Wayne just recovered from a severed jugular and is in Paris with Catwoman. Most strange of all, Scott Snyder's own Justice League You're the Villain tie-in story, Justice Do More, just began. Snyder and writing associate James Tynion IV have been building to a conflict between an extremely OP Lex Luthor and his Legion of Doom for over a year now. Seemingly every hero in the DC universe, including Batman, Superman, and the Justice Society of America, are fighting for the survival of the entire galaxy on a distant planet. This feels like world-class mismanagement on the part of publishers Dan Didio and Jim Lee, DC editorial, and You're the Villain frontman Scott Snyder. How can Batman and Superman conceivably be fighting all these enormous threats simultaneously? Not to mention, this very comic takes place in Gotham City. And guess who's not running the streets of Gotham in this comic book? Bane and his army of villains. Why have a shared universe with continuity if you're just going to ignore it? Not to mention, all these huge stories make this the absolute worst moment to launch this new You're the Villain Batman Superman series that only serves making things even more confusing. But believe it or not, Dan Didio, Jim Lee, and the brass at DC Comics have made an even greater error leading into Batman Superman. For weeks, if not months, DC have been spoiling the very mystery Batman Superman is supposed to center on. The Secret Six are most definitely not secrets at this point. DC Comics have sabotaged the central mystery behind their team-up event book featuring the two most iconic heroes in comics. To hopefully, maybe, but probably not even, generate a couple extra buys for Hawkman, Supergirl, and the 2 infected specials written by mega hack Cena Grace and so boring he's completely hopeless Hallam. DC Comics is so bass-ackwards right now, the only way to describe the performance of Dan Didio, Jim Lee, and Bob Harras is managerial malpractice. Can you imagine going in to see The Usual Suspects knowing the identity of Kaiser Soze? It would ruin the point of the mystery film. It literally can't work without the key plot element being a mystery until what is probably the best movie reveal ever. What point is served by spoiling Batman Superman's central mystery before it even starts? Needless to say, between multiple enormous stories and events featuring Batman and Superman, and DC spoiling the mystery behind the series, Joshua Williamson and David Marquez have their work cut out for them to make this comic book feel special. Unfortunately, I don't believe that happened. Now let's get into my reasoning for being so disappointed in this comic in my Batman Superman #1 comic book review. As usual, we're starting with the artwork first, which isn't one of the issues with this comic. David Marquez acquits himself very well in Batman Superman. He nails the look and feel of both iconic characters. Superman has a very stoic look, and his poses are extremely powerful. Marquez is known for dynamite facial work, and that really rings true here. If Marquez gets a follow-up assignment on a Supes title, it will be well earned. A lot of modern artists struggle by making him look and feel too human as Superman, If any character in comics needs to stand out in a crowd of superheroes, it's Superman. His Batman visuals are also on point. Bruce Wayne has a brooding expression with pursed lips throughout this comic. I really like how he uses the classic silhouette Batman before Superman arrives. It feels like Batman in his native Gotham environment. I am, however, not extremely impressed with color artist Alejandro Sanchez. His color palette is too subdued, especially with regards to Superman. Batman and Superman look like a formidable duo, and Marquez makes sure they both shine on the page together. My one complaint with Marquez's visuals is that multiple sequences have little or no background details. Otherwise, I think he does a terrific job on this book, and most definitely carries his own weight. I wish the color artist pumped a bit more life and cinematic flair into the book, but the visuals in Batman and Superman are well above average. I rate the art 4 out of 5. So like I mentioned earlier, DC Comics did writer Joshua Williamson no favors setting the table for this comic. And while I think he's a more than capable writer, he actually doesn't do much of anything interesting in an uninspired comic book. This is a really weird start to an event book. Basically, for 20 pages or so, Williamson recaps the events leading up to Batman and Superman. This feels like something that should have been covered in the Year of the Villain special or a teaser book for Free Comic Book Day. I personally think every comic should be written like it's a jumping on point for new readers, so past information relevant to current dynamics and future events definitely should be covered, but dedicating this much real estate is overkill in my mind. Asking readers to pay for a recap of a story that just wrapped up in Batman Who Lolls doesn't really sit well with me. It's very similar to my feelings for the way Bendis handled the first 2 issues of Event Leviathan. The story starts with Clark at the Daily Planet being summoned to the Watchtower by Batman. At this moment, an endless loop of narration explaining that Batman and Superman are very different heroes begins. And this goes on basically the entire comic. It's extremely repetitive and tries to gin up mistrust and tension between the heroes, but it all honestly just falls flat. When Superman arrives at the Watchtower, we learn this isn't Earth-Zero, but an alternate reality from the dark multiverse. Batman Who Lolls has set Superman up and infected him with the same pathogen this world's Joker infected Batman with. I will mention I think this version of Who Lolls is much cooler looking than normal, but I imagine this is just early in his transformation and don't expect this superior look to have any staying power. When Batman and Superman finally meet up in Gotham on Earth-Zero, both are still thinking about how different they are. It feels like retread information that's fully established already in the DC universe. Superman thinks, part of being Batman is theatrics. I tried out for Hamlet in Smallville once. Ma said, there can't be a superpower for everything. Batman thinks, people think I have a flair for the dramatic, but Clark's not acting. He's genuinely this person. This doesn't feel relevant to the story or like any new information. I think most readers who pick up this comic already know Batman and Superman are very dissimilar heroes who work together. A lot. Bat and Soups meet Commissioner Gordon, and finally some new information is presented that sets up the beginning of the story. 13-year-old Danny Mills was kidnapped from his home. Superman asks if they suspect Batman Who Lolls. Gordon explains Danny's little brother claims Superman kidnapped him and was laughing. A Superman Who Lolls on Earth-Zero is just recycling the Batman Who Lolls character. I really hope DC don't run the Who Lolls gimmick into the ground like Year One. Just because the idea hit with one character doesn't mean it needs to happen with every character. Gordon was kidnapped by Batman Who Lolls in Snyder's miniseries and gives Superman and Batman key information to finding the Dark Batcave. This whole time, Batman interrogates Superman about what his contingency plans are for him turning evil. Williamson really hammers home over and over that Batman and Superman are different. Superman objects to the interrogation and is adamant he's not infected. He's not the Superman Who Lolls. The duo explain in too much detail Gordon's kidnapping after they discover the Dark Batcave. Like I mentioned, there just isn't much new information provided. They do discover Who Lolls crafted a set of batarangs fused with the Joker pathogen, but Batman and Superman don't even do any investigative work to discover this. Batman's suit just does the forensics analysis for him automatically. I honestly hate that Batman's tech has overtaken his detective skills in modern DC. Most of his investigative techniques are all automated now. It makes the discovery portion really boring and never highlights that he's the world's greatest detective. Eventually, a display surrounds the duo, and they learn that any hero in the DC universe could be infected. This would be a really cool reveal if DC hadn't spoiled it many times over the past few months. One of the Who-Law's Robins jumps out and attacks Superman. Once again, DC already spoiled this moment in DC's sneak peek marketing efforts months back. This Robin is not one of Bruce's proteges from the Dark Multiverse, but in fact, young Billy Batson, aka Shazam, infected with the Joker's pathogen. This should have been an amazing moment, leaving readers clamoring for the next issue. But it's old information. We've known for months this very moment is coming. The very last image wasn't spoiled and is really cool, but it's honestly too little too late. In my mind, Joshua Williamson was set up for a good bit of failure in this issue due to all the spoilers and reveals DC management put out beforehand. It was always going to take a Herculean writing effort to make this comic exciting and not feel paint by numbers. Unfortunately, he falters under unnecessarily difficult circumstances. Overall, his characterization is fine, but it's all retread information most every reader already knows. There are no character moments that feel important here. I rate the characterization of Batman Superman 2.5 out of 5. A majority of the plot is exposition regurgitating old story information. The new events that do occur were spoiled long ago. I rate the plot 1.5 out of 5. DC Comics put Joshua Williamson and David Marquez in an unenviable position with the timing and spoilers of Batman Superman. While Marquez does an admirable job trying to make this comic exciting visually, Williamson hammers home that Batman and Superman are DC's odd couple far too hard, far too often. Very little of note occurs in the story. Fan favorite villain Batman Who Lulls appears in the comic for all of one panel in a flashback. It all makes for a lackluster reading experience. Batman Superman #1 is a perfectly average, boring comic. I rate it 2.5 out of 5. If you're excited for Year of the Villain, you still need to read this comic. And I do think the series will improve. More skeptical readers like myself should skip this comic and hope for better results in issue 2. Joshua Williamson, who is a talented author, fails to take the proverbial lemons Didio, Lee, and Snyder handed him and transform them into lemonade. If you're a viewer of the channel, you know I'm already highly skeptical of Year the Villain. The way DC's promoting and now executing it in Batman Superman has only firmed my stance. I predict this series gets better moving forward, but I'm personally not coming along for the ride. After this issue, Batman Superman officially isn't worth my time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.